Leaden glare burned across the oak table as hands rose to end my tenure in silence. I'm Silas Merrick, in my 50s, COO. My pocket watch ticked steady in my palm as the board sealed my fate. Ever felt time fracture without a sound. The oak table gleamed under the LED glare so bright it could have been an autopsy slab. My reflection looked smaller than I felt, jaw-tight lips dry. The chair cleared his throat. It wasn't loud, but the vibration filled the glass-walled room, and when he said, "We'll proceed with the confidence vote," every nerve in my body went taut. My name hung there unsaid, yet heavier than the November drizzle streaking across the city outside. A tiny red light blinked in the corner of the ceiling, one of those security cameras most people forget exists. Its rhythm was steady, a quiet pulse like a metronome marking the death of a song. I wondered if it would remember this moment better than any of these faces. I kept my hands flat on the table, fingers splayed like I could press order back into the chaos. The oak smelled faintly of polish mixed with the damp fur scent that sneaked in whenever the door cracked open. Someone's chair leg scraped a sound sharp enough to draw blood. Wyatt Lane sat across from me, his suit dark as an oil spill, smile stretched but brittle. Acting CEO for now, maybe more in 30 minutes. He had that gleam in his eyes, victory wrapped in courtesy. "This is purely fiduciary, Silas," he said, sliding a glossy dossier across the table. My photo sat on top, clipped at a perfect angle, like a headstone on paper. I didn't pick it up. My thumb brushed the pocket of my vest, finding the smooth curve of the watch inside. The silver was cool against my skin, the tick steady like a friend who didn't need words. That watch had measured decades of mornings and midnights. Today it measured humiliation in beats per second. A Slack notification chimed from Greer Halley's laptop, a quick metallic ping that cut through the hush like a bullet in velvet. Her fingers danced on the keyboard, eyes flicking up now and then, guilty maybe, or just calculating the safest place to land if the floor gave way. The board chair spoke again, tone crisp as if reading minutes about office paint instead of my career. All in favor. Hands began to rise. One, then another, then a cluster, like dominoes tipping. I stared at the veins on my own hands, willing them still. My signature ring glinted an absurd bit of vanity now. No debate, no second act. Just the soft click of pens, the shuffle of papers, sealing what a dozen conversations behind closed doors had already decided. Title gone, authority stripped clean, without a single blow, unless you counted the one echoing inside my ribs. The drizzle outside thickened raindrops tracing crooked paths down the glass. I wanted to stand to say something about integrity, about decades of 3 a.m. calls and payroll rescues, but the words sat like stones in my throat. Maybe silence was stronger. Maybe that's all I had left to wield. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket, a small vibration like a trapped insect. Caleb. My son's name glowed through the fabric warm against my side. I ignored it once. It buzzed again, a second heartbeat against the ticking watch. The screen lit up as if it knew an ember in the gray. I told myself I'd call back in 5 minutes. I told myself a lot of things. Outside headlights smeared into liquid streaks across the street. Inside, Wyatt reached for his glass of water, the ice clinking like laughter. I fixed my eyes on the blinking red light in the corner, the only witness that didn't look away. And then the chair said, "Motion carried." Everything else went quiet. By nightfall, my name glared from every LinkedIn feed like a flashing siren. Headlines flickered against the rain-streaked glass of my office window, the city beyond melting into gray. The heater hummed low, no match for the cold crawling up my sleeves. Greer's text arrived first. "You okay? You need to see this link." I clicked. Oregon Business Journal. My photo sat under a headline that read like a verdict: Everhart COO under fire for mismanagement allegations. Below it, a quote from an internal source who clearly spoke in present tense, as if they'd just left the room where I'd been gutted. My stomach hollowed. The oak desk, solid through years of decisions, suddenly felt like driftwood. The phone chimed again, notifications detonating one after another. Mentions, tags, the hashtag, #Everhart crisis, crawling across my screen like ants. Even recruiters I didn't know were chiming in with thin sympathy. In my voicemail queue, Wyatt's voice waited like a coiled snake. "It's better this way." I didn't play it. Not yet. I printed the article. The machine whined like it resented the task. When the first page slid out, the ink was still warm, bleeding faintly where my thumb pressed too hard. It smelled metallic, sharp as the taste at the back of my throat. I stacked the pages, reading between the lines for fingerprints I couldn't see. Someone wanted me erased methodically, surgically. Then the trade blogs picked it up. One called it a fiduciary lapse, another a cultural failure, words tossed like grenades by people who'd never stepped inside our boardroom. Greer pinged me on Slack, "Careful who you trust. No emoji, no padding. Just that." I checked my inbox. There it was, an email marked "Company-wide update." Wyatt's subject line, "Stability First Leadership." Realignment glared like hazard lights. My name wasn't in the body. It wasn't anywhere. The list of continuing executives ran short and clean, as if I'd never existed. The signatures at the bottom 6 of them marched across the screen in perfect alignment, like they'd practiced. The printer spat the final sheet. A different texture. Thicker. My eyes snagged on a footer in small gray type filed county clerk, 11/15/23. It sat there cold and legal like a nail driven without sound. I picked it up, feeling the raised stamp through the paper. That weight told me what Wyatt's voicemail didn't. This wasn't just optics. This was groundwork for something permanent. The rain outside quickened, drumming on glass in uneven beats like a countdown I hadn't agreed to. I stood there, pages fanned across the desk, ink smearing under my fingertips, my reflection fractured in the dark window. I didn't answer Greer. I didn't call Wyatt. I just stared at that stamp until the letters blurred and the hum of the heater faded into the click of my watch, steady and small against the hollow rush in my ears. Filed. County Clerk. November 15th, and my phone still glowing on the desk, waiting to tell me what came next. Caleb slid into the vinyl booth like a man smuggling time shoulders, broad leather folder clutched against his chest, as if someone might snatch it in transit. The neon above us buzzed like a hornet that had lost its sting, washing the chrome edges in a sickly pink. The smell of burnt coffee tangled with fryer oil thick enough to coat my tongue. "You look like hell," Caleb said, settling across from me. His voice hadn't changed since the days he coached me through backyard curveballs, steel under warmth. a tone that could brace a wall or break it. "I've been better," I murmured, hands curling around a chipped mug the waitress dropped with a nod. The coffee inside was as dark as the circles under my eyes. He leaned forward, pushing the folder until it kissed my sleeve. "They buried it in '98, he said, almost gentle. "We dig it up, or you're done." I flipped the cover. The hinges creaked like brittle bone. Inside, yellowed pages bore blue ink signatures, their loops and tails sharp against the faded lines. The corporate seal embossed at the bottom was half ghost, but it still bit my fingertip when I traced it. My throat tightened. These were bylaws notarized and stamped when dial-up tones ruled the world. What am I looking at? My voice cracked, and I hated that he noticed. "Your lifeline," Caleb said, tapping a page with his scarred knuckle. "Board cannot remove an officer without unanimous consent unless felony proven." He looked up, eyes pale as the frost clinging to the diner window. "They cut corners, Silas. Document that." I skimmed the clauses, my pulse sinking with the words. Unanimous consent. Felony. Neither applied to me yet. Here I was sitting in exile while Wyatt sold stability to the world. Greer's slack ping replayed in my head like static. Careful who you trust. The irony tasted bitter now under fluorescent hum. "We map a chain," Caleb said, sketching with his finger on the formica. "Old policy here." He tapped the folder. "Recent email threads, they'll show procedure skipped. Missing audit pages, they'll show intent. Tie them together, and this takeover starts looking like a stunt." I stared at the inked names, each one a ghost. My own fingers trembled when I reached for my phone to snap a photo of the seal. Proof thin, fragile, but proof all the same. The waitress refilled our cups without asking, her perfume cutting through the grease and damp wool of my coat. Behind her, a jukebox coughed up a note and died. The diner held its breath. Then my phone vibrated. A text from Greer. "He's locking your office at 8 a.m. No preamble, no punctuation. Just the sound of a door slamming in digital ink." I shoved the phone back down and turned the last page. There, in steady strokes, was a name I hadn't spoken aloud in years: Wyatt's father. The man who once called me brother, who toasted me at his son's graduation, now anchoring a clause that could crack his boy's empire. The neon buzz grew louder, or maybe it was just my blood in my ears. Caleb watched me patient, as if he knew I'd need more than caffeine to swallow what came next. The fire snapped behind Wyatt like it was applauding his performance. He leaned back in the leather chair, voice honeyed with poison. "Take the deal, Silas. Walk away with dignity." The Mont Blanc pen twirled between his fingers, sleek and black, catching the firelight like a blade wearing silk. The lounge hummed low with Sinatra crooning from hidden speakers. Beyond the tall windows, Portland sagged under a sky the color of pewter rain, brushing the panes in nervous ticks. The document lay between us, crisp paper anchored by a crystal tumbler. Exit agreement embossed like an epitaph. My name nestled inside, paired with a figure that could buy a lifetime of quiet. And yet the serif font felt like shackles disguised as calligraphy. Wyatt's smile curled. "The equity group wants blood, yours or mine, and you know which way the wind's blowing." His cufflink winked as he leaned closer, cedar smoke riding his breath, soft as a threat. My thumb found the old pocket watch in my vest, its metal cool, its steady tick, a stubborn heartbeat against the hush of the club. It had anchored me through mergers' funerals nights when the market chewed men alive. My father's initials etched on the back still whispered of rules older than greed. I inhaled the scent of polished wood and single malt, let the silence stretch taut as wire. Then my fingers slipped. The watch tumbled a glint of brass and glass spinning slow before it kissed marble with a sound sharper than the fire's crack. Time fractured. The lens burst in a spiderweb shimmer shards fanning like a frozen scream across the floor. For a breath all I heard was the pop of the fire and the echo of Mont Blanc clicking shut. Greer stiffened near the credenza, her eyes darting, hands folding tight as if prayer could glue moments back together. Wyatt didn't flinch. He just smirked the kind of smirk that seals coffins and contracts alike. "Guess we're done here," he murmured, sliding the pen into his pocket like a prizefighter holstering steel. I bent slow, feeling shards bite through linen as I gathered what was left of the watch. A sliver nicked my palm. Warmth bloomed dark against white cloth. I wrapped the pieces in a handkerchief, the weight absurdly light for something that had once held my hours together. Wyatt's voice followed as I rose. "You can't fight a tide, Silas. It drowns saints faster than sinners." I didn't answer, just turned toward the door, the crackle of cedar fading behind me, shards pressing into my skin like punctuation marks. I refused to read aloud. Outside, the wind shoved rain sideways, hard and cold. I walked into it without looking back, the bundle in my fist resolve etched deeper than any cut. The cursor blinked over the subject line like a pulse on borrowed time, governance review mandatory attendance. I stared until the words swam, then typed 3 more to anchor them. February 12th, 10:05 a.m. The storm outside rattled the gutters in a rhythmic applause wind howling as if it knew the stakes better than I did. Stacks of legal pads sprawled across my desk, bleeding blue ink into pages scarred by coffee rings. On the right, USB drives lined up in a perfect row, small and silver like bullets polished for a war no one would admit was happening. Beside them in a shallow tray lay the shards of my father's watch, splintered brass glinting under lamplight, ticking only in memory. Caleb's voice rolled through the speakerphone low and steady. "Set the timer, Silas. Make them choke on their own clock." Almost there, I muttered, fingers hammering out the chain we'd built, piece by piece. First came the bylaws, those brittle pages Caleb unearthed, now scanned at 600 dpi, every seal crisp as a scar. Then the affidavit notarized with a red stamp that bled like a warning flare. I layered in the audit trails, tracing skipped approvals like footprints in fresh snow. Slack exports followed each thread a vein feeding into the heart of this mess. The storm flickered across the window pane, flashes turning my reflection into something skeletal. I clicked attach all and watched the progress bar creep like a wick burning low. Greer's encrypted email chimed soft, a ghost of reassurance. Copy clean. Metadata scrubbed. See you on the other side. I pictured her in some shadowed corner of HQ, eyes down, nerves wound tight. Loyalty had a price. I prayed I wasn't bankrupting her soul. I slid a USB into the port, waited for the chime, then ejected it with surgical care. Each one carried the same payload, a redundancy Caleb insisted on. "One fails, another fires," he'd said, voice like gravel ground under steel. I tucked them into a slim case, fingers brushing the jagged edge of a watch shard. It bit me shallow but sharp, and I didn't flinch. Pain had become punctuation marking the end of every illusion I'd once underlined twice. The UPS unit hummed under the desk, a soft promise of backup power, but I didn't trust it any more than Wyatt's handshake. My tongue tasted metallic fear steeped in adrenaline. I ran the email bomb test twice, syncing the delay to hit at 10:05 sharp, when the board's eyes would all point one way and Wyatt's mask might finally slip. Then my phone lit up voicemail Wyatt Lane, the transcript previewed just enough to make my jaw lock. Bring your lawyer. Or don't. His voice oiled the gaps between words, the kind of confidence men wear when they think the tide is theirs alone. I deleted nothing. Let the threat sit like a stone in my gut. The last keystroke felt like a trigger. Enter. The screen blinked. Word, then blacked out. No warning. No polite shutdown. Just silence broken by the soft tick of rain against glass. For a beat, I sat frozen lamplight carving gold into the shards on my desk. Power surge or someone pulling strings I couldn't see. The storm outside swallowed the street, and the hum of the UPS had gone mute. My reflection stared back from the dark screen fractured by lightning veins, and the clock in my head kept counting down. Wyatt's grin beamed brighter than the LED panel as the ticker rolled integrity update. Fluorescent glare washed the stage. Folding chairs squeaked as staff packed in rain drumming the corrugated roof like muted applause. The scent of burnt coffee drifted from a corner urn. Transparency saves us, he said, palms open for the cameras. 2 red tally lights winked. Behind him, screens bloomed with graphs arrows knifing downward percentages in crimson. Every arrow landed on my name. I kept my spine straight in the front row. The mic clipped to my lapel hissed static like a breath I didn't own. My fingers pressed against my thigh, steady as the clock I no longer wore. Across the aisle, Greer hovered by the AV booth, her blazer sharp as a blade. When our eyes met, she tapped the console 3 times, then stilled. The live stream counter climbed 1-200 watching. In the corner of the screen, my photo floated under a headline someone wrote with poison ink. Slack feeds pulsed on employee phones memes with my face behind an hourglass. Over the last month, we've done a deep dive. Wyatt continued, voice dipped in velvet. We found oversight gaps, but our values endure. He stepped forward into the light, and the cameras leaned with him like trained dogs. I noticed what didn't belong. A man by the exit jacket, 2 plain boots, 2 heavy earpiece glinting like a fishhook. Badge leather winked when he shifted. He wasn't on payroll. Wyatt gestured toward a new slide culture at risk. The HR head hovered with a tablet knuckles white on the case. Another ping from Slack fed the screen behind them. SOT ethics first trending. And a meme of my old headshot, skinned with sand falling grain by grain. My phone thrummed in my pocket, low and insistent. I let it hum. Before we share next steps, Wyatt said real questions. Let's open the floor. His smile carried the dare. A mic runner jogged down the aisle, hoodie bright under the white glare. Hands hesitated like birds in wind until one rose. Junior analyst voice steady after a tremor. Is it true legal counsel quit yesterday? The question detonated without sound. Murmurs bloomed sharp and fast. The live stream chat went feral. Wait, WTF source. Wyatt's jaw flexed before the grin returned. We don't comment on personnel matters, he said smoothly. Our legal needs are covered. He pivoted, hard voice punching through static. Next question. But no one volunteered. The rain shifted registers overhead, and in the hush a paper cup crumpled like a dry leaf. The badge man near the exit pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. His lips barely moved. Wyatt filled the gap with polished words, grateful for Resilient's shared journey control measures, each syllable ironed flat. The screens behind him flashed a flowchart dressed in corporate colors. My breath tasted of metal and old coffee grounds. Another buzz from my phone. I slid it open under the table edge. They've landed. 3 words bright as a flare in fog. I pocketed the glow and lifted my eyes into the blaze of lights. The cameras were still watching. So was everyone else. None of them knew the tide had just turned. When the double doors swung, the hum collapsed like oxygen sucked from the room. Wyatt's voice froze mid-vowel. Every head pivoted to the figures cutting through fluorescent glare, 2 silhouettes in dark wool badges glinting like cold suns. The scent of damp wool and metal seeped in with them, riding on a draft that smelled faintly of rain and steel. Attorney General's office. The taller one said, voice flat as courtroom marble. A clipboard rode his left hand. The right brushed the seal on his belt like punctuation. Behind him, a second agent gripped a pouch marked with a chain of custody tag, the zip seam bright as a scar. Wyatt's throat worked once hard. This is what exactly? His words tripped on themselves, thin as floss. The red tally light above camera 1 pulsed. Still live, still rolling. By court order, the agent continued letting his gaze rake across the stage. Custody of electronic evidence commences now. My body rose before thought did. The chair legs scuffed concrete with a sound sharp enough to slice the hush. My shoes felt heavier than any boots I wore in winter storms. I walked into the light heat, slapping my skin. Heart swinging like a pendulum behind my ribs. From my inside pocket, I drew the USB. Label neat timestamp printed like scripture. My hand didn't shake when I held it out, though the weight of months clung like frost. A stir, gasps folded into the rustle of polyester suits. Greer's face flashed beyond the AV rig pupils, blown wide jaw taut. Someone's phone camera angled up, catching the gleam of soldered gold on my other palm. The watch. Its spine healed in a thread of molten light. A wound remade into art. I let it rest against my thumb, ticking like a patient witness. "Package received," said the second agent, sliding the USB into the pouch with a zip sound that pinned the moment in amber. He initialed the chain of custody tag ink, bleeding into paper fibers. Read it. The first agent told a clerk trailing behind gray suit hair, like wire. She unfolded a document crisp as frost voice, steady under the weight of lenses and 1,000 eyes. Effective immediately, she read, "Silas Merrick is reinstated as Chief Operating Officer pending full review and subject to protective provisions under Oregon Corporate Statute." Words drummed like a slow verdict marched syllable after syllable, pounding through the rafters. The red tally light above the main cam throbbed like a verdict bell. Shutters began their insect chatter, click, 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 layered over the whisper surge of live stream comments detonating in real time. Wyatt tried to smile. It broke on his teeth. "This is a misunderstanding." His voice drowned under the metallic hail of clicks and the faint crackle of an AG radio spitting codes. Board members ghosted in from side doors, perfume and panic leaking from their seams. Reporters craned their necks like carrion birds scenting heat. The HR head folded her tablet to her chest as though it might sprout a shield. I signed the transfer log with a pen heavy as guilt, the ink biting into grain. The investigator countersigned his knuckles, pale ridges over blue veins. No words passed. Only the dry rustle of forms, the whisper of nylon evidence gloves, the faint hum of fluorescents coughing dust into light. Greer slipped close as the agents turned to leave Boots chewing the hush. Her perfume cut through the odor of old wiring and cedar polish, bright as citrus. She leaned just enough for her breath to sketch my ear. "Check your feed," she murmured. The double doors sighed shut behind the badges, and the room's lungs filled with noise. Again, questions, shouts, camera shutters, ricocheting like hail on tin. My phone buzzed in my palm, its glow punching through the dim like a flare. #justice served. Then another, #rulebook reborn. Then a cascade hashtag spilling like champagne from a cracked bottle screen awash in confetti emojis and headlines screaming in fonts too large to swallow. AG swoop stuns lane 1 read. Another Merrick returns live. I turned the patched watch over once gold seam warm against my skin and wondered how long before silence returned, or if I'd ever need silence again. The office smelled of dust and citrus polish when I turned the key first time in 5 months. The lock stuck, then gave with a sigh, and the door swung onto a room stripped of its ego, no framed press clippings, no acrylic award shaped like a flame, just the outline ghosts where nails had been. Rain glossed the windows, the city blurred into a watercolor confession. The HVAC let out a long, timid breath like the building wasn't sure it wanted me back. Greer stood at the window with a banker's box hugged to her ribs. "Welcome home," she said, and the smile she found was narrow but real. She set the box on the credenza and slid the lid off. Old files breathed out contract binders, a coil-bound budget from a saner year, a scuffed nameplate with my title sanded thin. Caleb followed a paper cup balanced on 2 fingers, leaning in the doorway like he owned the hinge. He scanned the ceiling and the baseboards the way a man checks for hairline cracks before a storm. "They'll write posts," he said, setting the coffee on my desk. "You write policies." I walked a slow circle inventorying the ruins. 2 major contracts voided in the freeze, one stuck in escrow like a fly in amber. Vendor goodwill scorched where the rumor mill ran hot. HR attrition worse than any quarter I could remember. The ledger in my head stacked totals without asking. Greer fanned a sheaf of paper across the desk. The whisper of it filled the room. "Thank you card," she said, and slid a sealed envelope forward. Blue ink bled through the flap in little tides. "They took it around after you. After the town hall." I opened it carefully. Inside a cheap card printed with a watercolor tree and words that didn't matter. What mattered were the signatures, dozens of them, some careful, some a rush, Lark Hollis, Quinn, Maeve, Byron, Ash. Small lines under some names for the late-night saves for telling the truth. I held the weight of it like a fragile organ. Caleb set his elbows on the desk. "Here's the skeleton," he said, voice low. "Rotate board seats, staggered terms, hard caps. Publish a transparency log approvals over 50 grand conflicts disclosed minutes posted within 48 hours. Bring in an outside auditor, not one of the usual polite firms. And stand up a whistleblower channel that doesn't dead-end in legal." Greer nodded once. "And a live governance page on the intranet," she said. "Plain language, a change log, so people see what shifts, when and why." I sank into the chair and felt the leather resist, then accept me. "Term limits mean elections," I said. "Elections mean a calendar." I flipped open a legal pad, blue lines like lanes to swim. We post the calendar today. Caleb grinned without showing teeth. There you go. We moved briskly, drawing boxes on paper, then turning them into memos with verbs. Greer opened her laptop. The keys clicked a rhythm that steadied the room. I dictated, and she gave the words, bones. Effective immediately, votes will be recorded as roll call and posted by 5 p.m. same day. Special meeting scheduled per bylaws. 440 C. Procurement thresholds reset to pre-exception levels. Waivers require 2 signatures outside the requester's chain. The rain kept time on the glass, steady and soft. The HVAC hummed like a tired choir. We paused only to sip coffee that tasted like pencil shavings and resolve. Contracts, I said, tapping a column. The 2 voids. We salvage one, let one go. Greer slid a tabbed folder across. The salvageable one. The paper warmed my fingers. Someone had annotated in denim blue ink tiny notes about milestones and penalties, the handwriting brisk, almost cheerful. I knew the hand, Maves. I swallowed. Caleb angled the folder toward him, scanned. We go back to them with a mea culpa and a new clause, he said. And you show them the governance page. People sign with their eyes before they sign with their pen. The phone buzzed on the desk, an unknown number, bright against the dim. I didn't move. It buzzed again, then trailed into voicemail. Greer glanced up. Press? She asked. Probably. I let the icon pulse. They want the man who rewrote the script. I set the card back in its envelope like it might bruise. I'd rather write the script. Caleb's mouth ticked. Good. We don't win by arguing. We win by posting receipts. We built the first week's receipts. Greer mocked up the governance page, clean columns, dates, in a font you didn't have to squint to trust. She added a little bar at the top. What changed today? On the second monitor, a draft memo formed under my voice, practical and unpretty. The work made a sound I recognized, the small, steady grind of a machine tuned to useful. Security, Greer said softly, half to herself. We need a new policy on admin rights, and a ban on forwarding internal drafts to personal accounts. Write it, I said, and the exemption process short, loud, and rare. She smiled for real that time, and the room lightened a degree. The rain did too. Caleb pushed back from the desk and stretched. The bones in his shoulders popped like twigs. He took a slow look around the corners one more time, then settled. You bitter? He asked, not unkind. I watched the city smear and refocus between drops, the office stripped to its frame, the card warmed by my palm. No, I said. Clear. He nodded once, as if that answer was the only one he'd come for. Good. Anger burns hot and quick. Clarity keeps a ledger. The voicemail icon blinked. I tapped it on speaker. A woman's voice unfurled, measured hungry. Press request for Mr. Merrick. We're doing a feature on the man who rewrote the script. Would love your perspective on redemption and reform, on record today if possible. I hit end. We'll send the policy links, I said. They can quote our pages. Greer slid a small craft envelope across the desk with 2 fingers. One more thing you might want. I opened it and found a sliver of glass from the old watch. The edge rounded smooth now, as if somebody had worried it in a pocket until time softened the bite. I found it when I cleaned your desk, she said. Eyes on mine, then on the window. Seemed wrong to throw away something that remembered. I turned the shard in my palm. It caught the lamplight and held it gently without a cut. The HVAC sighed again, long and low, and the rain answered with a whisper on the pane. We wrote until the page said enough for one day. Then I placed the shard in the top drawer, laid the thank you card beside it, and closed the wood with my fingertips. The room felt quieter, not empty, like a bell after its note finds the walls. Outside, the city rinsed itself. Inside we began. Sunlight poured through cedar beams like liquid brass flooding the community hall, until every glass jar and folding chair gleamed. The air smelled of wild mint crushed underfoot, mingling with a low drift of BBQ smoke curling from the grill outside. Applause broke out, slow, steady, sincere, like rain on soil too long dry. Caleb stood off to my left, the collar of his shirt open, a dark line of sweat at his temple. Greer hovered near the donor table where a glass display case waited under a spray of cedar leaves. Inside it lay the watch gleaming where solder stitched its crack like a scar turned to scripture. Below the plaque read, "Time redeemed." I took in the rows of faces, some from the board, some from shop floors, a few kids darting between legs, laughter skipping like flat stones. Local press leaned against door frames, cameras drooping like tired birds. Their lenses caught the ribbons strung across the garden arch, a shade too red against the midsummer blue. Beyond the arch, the sun baked the asphalt lot into a mirage, but here under beams and vines it felt almost kind. Greer pressed a pair of scissors into my palm. They were heavier than they looked, blades dulled from 100 school openings and park dedications. She mouthed steady, though her own smile trembled like a wire in wind. The crowd hushed as Caleb raised his voice, rough and warm. Today we cut more than a ribbon. We cut loose every lie that said one man's fall couldn't seed something better. He gestured to me with an easy sweep like we were still kids swapping bikes on a dirt road. "Silas, your turn." I stepped forward, the grass crisp under my soles, and felt my shirt cling between my shoulder blades. The microphone wobbled when I touched it, but the sound that carried was mine, calm and spare. "This isn't payback," I said. A pause to let the cedar creak and a bird dart past. "It's pay forward." A ripple of nods, a cough from the back, then silence again, the good kind, the listening kind. I cleared my throat, tasted iron at the edge of pride. The Caleb Fund starts small, a scholarship for blue-collar families, a workshop on honest ledgers, one seed at a time in open ground. Hands came together, not the thunder of a boardroom vote, but a softer percussion like rain consenting to stay. A ribbon fiber quivered as breeze pushed through the arch. I cut once clean, and the red band sighed apart, falling in two loose tongues. Cameras blinked, but I kept my eyes on the pieces curling into the grass. Kids erupted, then streaking between chairs, their laughter cracking the last shell of corporate hush. Someone dragged a picnic bench closer to the grill. The smell of char brushed the air, sticky and sweet. I let it settle on my skin. A reporter stepped forward, a notebook limp in one hand. "Do you regret the fight?" she asked, voice careful like probing a wound. I smiled. Not sharp, not soft, just true. "Regret," I said, "is dead weight." The cedar leaves shimmered as if agreeing. We travel light. Flashbulbs winked, and somewhere a child shouted for lemonade. Greer touched my elbow, a brush, not a pull, and tilted her chin toward the donor table. the case-weighted glass catching stray sun. I walked slow each step, measuring something I couldn't name, and reached for the watch. Its face glowed like a muted moon, the crack sealed with a golden seam that mocked and honored time in the same breath. My fingers lingered on the metal warm from the heat trapped in its bones. Then I set it down inside the case, centered on velvet, dark as old ink. Sunlight slanted through the cedar beams and kissed that seam bright enough to burn soft enough to bless. A scar shining like a badge. A wound, or a vow, maybe both. Behind me the laughter swelled, braided with applause, and I felt the weight leave like dust shaken from boots. Outside the grill hissed. Inside the glass held the watch, and the watch held a promise not to start over, but to start true. The scent of wood polish lingered on the table as I set the glass case in place. The gold-soldered seam on the pocket watch caught the light, thin as a thread stitching time shut. On the hallway bulletin board, a community flyer read, "Caleb Fund First Scholarship Awarded. Justice. I've learned isn't a thunderclap, but a quiet drop landing where it matters most. We all lose jobs or trust at some point, but there's a road back if you hold on to one thing that stays true." When was the last time you believed a fracture could turn into a seam of light?